In the darkest corners of history, some names are whispered not for the empires they built, but for the nightmares they inspired. One such name is Vlad the Impaler. But what if the monster we think we know was, in reality, a desperate protector, a ruthless patriot forged in the crucible of war and betrayal? Forget the fanged caricature for a moment. To understand the man, we must first confront the brutal world that made him. A world where survival was a privilege, not a right, and where the line between hero and villain was written in blood. Welcome to the 15th century, a turbulent era where the mighty Ottoman Empire cast a long, menacing shadow over Eastern Europe. At the crossroads of this epic struggle lay the small but fiercely independent Principality of Wallachia, a buffer state caught between the ambitions of the Ottoman Sultan and the Hungarian kingdom. This was a land of dense forests, fortified monasteries, and a people accustomed to constant warfare. Loyalty was a commodity, betrayal a daily currency. It was into this powder keg that Vlad III was born, around 1431. He wasn't born a monster. He was a prince of a vulnerable nation. His father, Vlad II Dracula, was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric order dedicated to defending Christianity against the Ottoman advance. The name Dracula meant the dragon. Consequently, Vlad III became known as Dracula, meaning son of the dragon. This title, now synonymous with horror, was originally a badge of honor, a symbol of his family's sacred duty to protect their homeland and their faith. But a prince's life was far from gilded. As a young boy, Vlad and his younger brother, Radu, were handed over to the Ottoman Sultan as political hostages to ensure their father's loyalty. This was a common, cruel practice of the time. For years, Vlad was raised in the heart of the enemy's court. He witnessed the Sultan's absolute power and his unforgiving methods firsthand. While his brother adapted, even befriending the future Sultan Mehmed II, Vlad's heart hardened. He learned Turkish, studied the Quran, and mastered Ottoman military tactics, but inside, a cold fire of resentment burned. This experience didn't just teach him about his enemy. It taught him that power, absolute and terrifying, was the only language his adversaries would ever understand. When he finally returned to Wallachia to claim his throne, he was no longer a boy. He was a survivor, a strategist, and a man with a singular iron-willed purpose: to secure Wallach's independence at any cost. Vlad's reign was a symphony of brutal efficiency. He inherited a kingdom riddled with corruption and internal strife among the noble class, the boyars, who had often collaborated with foreign powers for personal gain. They had betrayed his father and brother, and Vlad knew they would do the same to him. His solution was as swift as it was horrifying. One Easter Sunday, he invited hundreds of boyars and their families to a grand feast. In the middle of the celebration, he had them all seized. The older ones were impaled on the spot, a slow and agonizing execution meant to be a public spectacle. The younger, healthier ones were marched 50 miles to build what would become Ponari Castle, his infamous fortress. Many died from exhaustion, but Vlad had sent his message. Disloyalty would be met not just with death, but with unimaginable suffering. His methods were a calculated campaign of terror. He sought to purge Wallachia of all he deemed unproductive or disloyal. He targeted corrupt merchants, thieves, and even the poor and sick, allegedly rounding them up for a feast before burning the hall down around them, claiming he was lessening the burden on his people. But his most legendary cruelty was reserved for his external enemies, the Ottomans. When Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, sent envoys demanding tribute, they refused to remove their turbans in Vlad's presence, citing religious custom. Vlad praised their devotion and offered to strengthen it by having their turbans nailed to their heads. This was more than just cruelty. It was psychological warfare. When Mehmed finally led a massive army to crush Wallachia, he was met not with a conventional battle, but with a nightmare. Vlad waged a guerrilla war, poisoning wells, burning villages, and launching surprise night attacks on the Ottoman camp. The climax of his campaign of terror came when the Sultan's army approached the capital of Targovik. There, stretching for miles, was a grotesque forest of the dead. Over 20,000 impaled bodies of captured Turkish soldiers and collaborators lined the road. The sight and stench were so horrific that the battle-hardened Ottoman army was psychologically broken. Even Mehmed, a man who had conquered the greatest city on earth, was so shaken that he turned his army around and retreated. Vlad had won, not by a clash of swords, but through the sheer power of fear. But here's the twist that history often overlooks. While the world remembers him as a monster in his homeland of Romania, Vlad the Impaler is often remembered very differently as a national hero. He is seen as a fierce patriot, a strict but just ruler who fought for his people's independence against overwhelming odds. Was his cruelty necessary? To the boyars he slaughtered, he was a tyrant. To the Ottomans he terrified, he was the devil incarnate. But to the common Wallachian peasant, whose farm was no longer raided and whose family was safe from invaders, was he a savior? This is the paradox of Vlad Dracula. His brutal methods of impalement were not unique to him. They were a known form of execution at the time. What was unique was the scale and the strategic psychological way he employed it. He used terror as a weapon of statecraft, a tool to unify a fractured nation and fend off a superpower. So, the question isn't just whether he was a monster. The more challenging question is, can a monster also be a hero? Can a man who commits unspeakable acts in the name of his nation's survival be celebrated by the very people he ruled with an iron fist? The legend of the vampire, which was attached to his name centuries later by Bram Stoker, is a fiction. But the terrifying reality of the man himself, a ruthless leader forged in a ruthless time, is far more complex and unsettling. Vlad's legacy is a fractured mirror, reflecting different images depending on who is looking. In the West, his name, forever linked to Bram Stoker's vampire, is the very definition of Gothic horror. Dracula is a pop culture icon, a creature of the night completely detached from the historical man. But travel to Romania, and you'll find his castles are tourist destinations. His portrait hangs in museums, and his story is told not as one of a monster, but of a defender of the nation. His fortress, Panari Castle, now lies in ruins, but it stands as a rugged testament to his defiant spirit. The monasteries he founded still stand, symbols of the pious Christian prince fighting to protect his faith. He was ultimately betrayed and killed, his head allegedly sent to the Sultan as proof of his demise. But his fight for independence laid the groundwork for a Romanian national identity that would endure for centuries. He showed that even a small nation, through sheer force of will, could stand against a titan. His brutal reign was short, but the echo of his defiance has lasted for over 500 years, proving that history is never just black and white. So, the next time you hear the name Dracula, look past the cape and fangs. Remember the prince who was once a hostage, the ruler who used terror as a tool, and the national hero whose methods continue to be debated to this day. History is filled with figures who walk the line between light and shadow, and their stories challenge us to question our own definitions of good and evil. Thanks for joining us on Echoes of Time. If you want to uncover more stories that history tried to forget, make sure to subscribe and join our journey into the past.